any like set agenda today or anything?
No, I just have like very basic questions, I guess. Like cuz learning to code, like that's the reason why we're having this session, is like I want to pick your brain a little bit. And a lot of it's very hard to do
Yep.
on your own. And I have personally tried it. I have not succeeded. I remember, like, even with the CS degree, I tried to learn certain frameworks, certain languages, I remember. And I just like, it was horrible. I didn't have the right game plan, I guess, the right, approach to it. I think now I'm a lot better. But I wanted to talk to somebody who kind of did, learn on their own. And I assume, and let me get this correct. You don't have a CS degree and you didn't go through a coding bootcamp, right?
No, that's correct. So
Okay.
I went to University of New Mexico and I got my
Uh,
degree in accounting.
okay.
So the thing is, when I was going to school,
Mm-hmm.
I was working full time, like night shift at the same time. So
Mm-hmm.
my GPA wasn't the best, but I know that if I was just concentrating on school full time, it would be a lot better. And just in general, but I was trying to become like a accounting at one of these big firms, like a big four, and become like an auditor, but that
Mm-hmm.
I just never got an opportunity to do that. So um, and about 4 years
Mm-hmm.
after I graduated, I
Mm-hmm.
started looking into other types of occupations.
Mm-hmm.
And what really got me interested into programming
Mm-hmm.
was my brother-in-law. He was a software engineer,
Mm-hmm.
and it was the first time I really had someone that I was like close with,
Mm-hmm.
and that talked about their profession, like in terms of computer science,
Mm-hmm.
and that really got my interest peaked. And
Okay.
yeah, so what happened is I was working at a company and I needed an accounting software because everything was paper based.
Mm-hmm.
And my brother-in-law, he recommended this PHP software that was open source. So
Mm-hmm.
he's like, oh, this does exactly what you need for the most part. I was like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
cool. And then I took that,
Mm-hmm.
and there was just a couple little things that I needed it to be a little bit more customized. So I just was
Right.
researching online, how can I get this to do this, right?
Right.
And I remember updating it, and
Yeah.
it did what I wanted. It took me
Right.
a long time. Like, it wasn't
Yeah.
just like
Right. Right.
it was like me
Right.
fumbling things because I didn't know exactly what code like the code was and everything.
Right.
So I would like change little things here and there. I was like, oh, okay, cool. I think I
Right.
need it where I wanted to, so I got it there. And then I was like, oh, this is actually pretty cool here.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
that actually, that approach that you had, modifying just a small part of a software or something, that's what I do now all the time. Like, I do that a lot. I don't start something from scratch. I rarely do. It's always something that already exists and just
yeah,
start working with it. And
yeah,
it's incredible how much you can learn or how much more efficient that could be. Everybody, like, sometimes, and that's one of the mistakes that I've made maybe in the past, where I tried to do something from scratch, like, oh, tried to build an app from beginning
yeah,
to end, in with a language that I've never worked with, a framework I
yeah,
don't even know what it is. A framework was at the time, but like,
yeah,
but now I was like, no, get something that's like already there and just see if you can
yeah,
add one thing to it. That's
yeah.
like,
No,
that to me, I feel like is huge in terms of learning coding.
yeah. It
It's
I think that's a great approach once you understand. Like you came from a CS background, so you understand
right.
the code, right? You can go in and kind of read whatever the control flow, the variables, and things like that. But if
Yeah.
you're coming and you
Right.
don't really understand,
Right.
starting from scratch, I feel like is a great way to get your legs under you because it's like you're trying to combine that, I guess, that 4 years of CS or whatever
Right.
coding boot camp that you're doing,
Right.
and you're trying to have an understanding of what you're trying to do. So,
Right.
at, honestly, after that piqued my interest, I kind
Right.
of was talking back and forth with my brother-in-law,
Yeah.
and was like, "Oh, what do I kind of need to get to if I wanted to become employable?" And
Right.
he gave me some like good pointers to try to like start,
Right.
and I did some research on my own, and I was like looking on Indeed and saying,
Uh-huh.
"Oh, where are the most jobs in terms
Right.
of like becoming a developer?" And it looked like
Okay,
it
good.
was
That's smart. Yeah.
Yeah, like a web developer.
Right.
And that was like the lowest barrier to entry, it seemed like,
Yeah.
because
Right.
if you got HTML, CSS, and
Mm-hmm.
JavaScript,
Mm-hmm.
those are like the building blocks there.
Mm-hmm.
And that that's what I focused my approach on.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I was naive in that, but
Right.
it felt like the right thing to do after the research that I've done in looking at the jobs and everything else.
Right.
Right.
No, I think that's no, that's probably that's probably a very smart thing to do. And I even with I'm a coding tutor, and with my students that are trying to learn coding and trying to become professional web developers, they're trying to become, because there could be different reasons why you want to learn coding. It could be like you want to
Yep.
create your own app. But for the ones that are trying to become professional developers, I usually tell them right from the beginning when I start my coding bootcamp, my class, I tell them from day one, start looking into jobs, start
Yep.
identifying the keywords, the companies that you're interested in, like get an idea of, you should have like some sort of like goal, some sort of target. So you're not
Yep.
wandering around aimlessly trying to learn, like, because like people that are trying to learn coding, I've noticed they always jump around because they don't
Yeah.
know. So they go from like learning JavaScript to next day, like maybe I should learn Python because I read on Reddit that Python is the next thing. And I
Yep.
tell them like, you're gonna end up nowhere, because like you
Yep.
keep jumping and you get frustrated because you're not learning. It's because you keep going between Python, JavaScript, and like just pick something, even, and if
Yep.
you need help with that, ask somebody. And you did the right way. You had somebody to talk to,
Yeah.
and then you looked
Yep.
up the position, the what's in demand, and I love the fact that you said lowest, the smallest barrier to entry, the easiest way to get in. I like that you identified that, so that was smart too. So that's kind of cool. It's I like that. Yeah. And you had
Yeah.
never coded before that, right? Because that first time you messed with that software, you hadn't coded, right, at that point?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's correct. Yeah. I really didn't. Yeah. I didn't touch anything in terms of code before that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but after it piqued my interest,
Yeah.
I actually at the same time I put in a WordPress website, but
Mm-hmm.
I just downloaded the template and put it in.
Yeah.
I didn't do any coding in terms of the
Right.
website. You have the
Yeah.
CMS, the
Right.
content management system, where you can go in,
Right.
you can change the colors and stuff like
Right.
that. But no code, just putting
Right.
images and stuff like
That,
that. Yeah.
but that's a
So
start, right? But that's a good
yeah,
start. Would you recommend somebody who has never coded before to mess with, like, WordPress is a very interesting thing in the web development world. It's its own
yeah,
category, there's web development and there's WordPress.
yeah.
And like, what do you think of
Yeah.
WordPress, especially from
I
in terms of new
actually
development?
I love WordPress. At the beginning, I was more of a hater, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
but the problem is I didn't understand,
Mm-hmm.
like this is a software,
Mm-hmm.
another tool in your box to be used in terms of software. Like, let's
Yeah.
say if you wanted to
Right.
get a client on your own,
Mm-hmm.
or you're working with someone and you're building a project for them.
Yeah.
If you have someone who doesn't know how to code and you
Right.
set up that project in WordPress and you
Right.
leverage the tools that they already have built in, it
Right.
makes it easy for that person who doesn't know any code to go update their website or add new
Right.
pages and things like that. So that
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, no, I definitely recommend WordPress, but I recommend before touching WordPress is going in and studying PHP, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to become a coder in that,
Right.
because what that allows you to do is see, oh, there's built-in things into WordPress. And if I understand PHP, I can manipulate those things. I
Mm-hmm.
can make it do exactly what I want. I can do like really cool things. And I can
Right.
do it a lot quicker, like you're saying, instead of doing it from
Right.
scratch.
Right.
There's big community, big open source community that's done already a ton of
Right.
things
Yeah.
within this framework here.
Right.
So let me go in and mess with the little parts there, and boom,
Right.
I got a working replica of a website that I can
Right.
give to someone and sell it to them, possibly.
Yeah. No, that's yeah, absolutely. What you just said, I feel like it's spot on. WordPress, like for the people that like don't know WordPress, like how would you? That's the other thing. Like how would you describe WordPress? Like I would just say it's web development on, or it's web management or web hosting on training wheels. It's kind
Yep.
of like a lot of the things already done for you. There's like thousands of like plugins, which is
Yeah.
amazing because it allows you to do so many things. You need to have a functioning form. Well, there's probably a plugin for that. You need this.
Yep.
And for a lot of people, what they don't realize, they're trying to learn coding for personal projects, but they might not realize that maybe they just need to be good with WordPress.
Yep.
Maybe they should take that out. And it helps to know a little bit, like you mentioned PHP. It's good to know a little bit of programming and web development concepts before going into WordPress or while you're learning WordPress, because you do have to sometimes mess with like things like, the DNS and like, if you're setting up a domain name. So some of these things, so, but yeah. But WordPress is a, like, how would you, like, what does it come down to?
How would I describe it? I would describe it as a super robust tool that you can get something started really quickly, and you can have custom stuff without even knowing how to code, right? There's a bunch of tutorials online to just do stuff without knowing how to code. But if you do know how to code in terms of working with PHP, HTML, CS, and JavaScript, then you can do some really, really cool things within the platform, right?
Yeah.
So the thing is, when you're, what I could do with WordPress is, this might be going a little bit off, but if I wanted to have a content management system be like my backend, to where it's like a REST API, to where I can just grab data from, I can have it be that, and someone can update that, and then I could do something custom on the front end, and like a React app, and use React on the front end, and have that be like a headless communication, instead of building my API in like Python or something from scratch. Like it's already here, it's built into WordPress, and I just got to grab the data and populate my React app, right?
Yeah.
So you can use it in so many different ways,
right?
And I don't know why it's so hated on, but I think.
Well, yeah, our community is full of haters. Like you've noticed that, I'm sure. Like anybody who comes into this industry and this community, I tell all my new students, please be aware that there's a lot of ego in this community, a lot of in any industry, but in this one especially, there's a lot of like, like, oh, you're not perfect, or you didn't. Like it's just, you constantly get judged in this industry. Like everything gets judged. Your number of lines, like how many empty lines you use, how many tab being used, like just like the smallest things. You know what I mean? Why are you using, this, and why are you using that? Like it just comes with the territory. And when you're a new developer, I think that it's very important to realize that, to tune that out, like you know, as long as you're honest with yourself and with the outside world about what you know, what you don't know, you're fine. You can't, the only thing you can't do is just claim something that you don't know. You can't say that. That's it. You can't say you're a React developer and, and just because you created, I don't want to say the wrong thing here, but like, you created one component in React and you're like, oh, I'm a React developer now,
You'll get called out, because if someone knows, like, oh, a real React developer, you're interviewing with them, they'll be like, oh, what does this do? How do you do this? You'll get called out, like,
exactly. And like, that's why I try to be as honest as I can personally, because I'm a tutor and people probably expect me to know everything, but I don't. First of all, there's a lot to learn. There's so much. Oh my God. I love it. That's part of the cool part about web development and software engineering. It's just, there's so much, right? But at the same time, like I'm only like I consider myself a senior entry-level developer. Like I'm just like on the senior end of the beginner level, like maybe mid now, maybe I'm like pushing it, but like, that's it. I'm gonna like be honest with employers that reach out to me, because a lot of employers sometimes will reach out to you and be like, hey, are you interested in this senior level position? I'm like, no, I'm not a senior level developer. I don't know where you get the idea from that I'm a senior level developer. Like, I'm sure you get this too. The famous email about a direct client that's interested in you, and like it's always a person that never checks out your background. They just did like blind search and they send you an email saying like 10 years of experience required. They're so annoying, but it happens a lot in our industry. And But my original point is that don't just try to learn to be as honest as you can, and
Yeah,
that's probably a big part of learning, right?
yeah. And the people you work with, especially if they're like good people, good developers, they appreciate that. They're like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, this person knows what they can do. They know where they can improve on. They, be humble, be approachable, and understand like your strength and weaknesses is a really good thing in anywhere, but definitely in the software industry, it's really big. Um,
Yeah, and
but
I think
yeah,
yeah, absolutely.
yeah. And
No,
I don't know if you want me to go on a little bit more about
yeah,
my beginning learning, like how I would took that approach and stuff. But
yeah. So okay, so just to recap, you had not CS background. You didn't go through coding boot camp. The first time you messed with coding was just with a little bit of PHP here and there. And yeah, and then yeah, so yeah, maybe now you can talk a little bit about like the
yeah,
beginning part of your learning. Yeah.
yeah. So after I figured out, hey, I wanted to do web development, I
Mhm.
really start zoning in on what I really needed to work on.
Mhm.
And actually, before I did a lot of research on if I should go through a coding boot camp,
Mhm.
and what that allowed me to do is see like, oh, what type of curriculum they had to
Mhm.
become a web developer. So I
Mhm.
know I needed to get good at HTML, CSS, JavaScript.
Mhm.
So what I did is I start doing YouTube tutorials,
Okay.
as well as I bought a Udemy course,
Uh-huh.
which was really good. And I started building my own portfolio website from following those tutorials. So
Okay.
I built
Nice. Uh-huh.
the exact project that they had within the tutorial, but
Uh-huh.
at the same time, I was building my portfolio website along the way
Uh-huh.
because I needed something that I could show if I
Right.
was going to
Right.
be
Yeah.
able to get into the industry. Yeah.
Yes.
So that
What
was
language did you do it? What technologies did you use? What to create the
so I
portfolio?
use so for my I just use HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, right?
Okay, perfect.
Those were the front end of my application.
Uh-huh.
Then for the back end, I did a Udemy course in PHP.
Okay.
So I built my back end and I did it in straight PHP. I didn't use
Uh-huh.
any like any helper tools or anything like that
Right. Any
because I was like,
frameworks?
oh, I
Yeah.
really need to, yeah, I need to
Yeah.
understand the language themselves. And you know what's funny is when I first started, I was hating on Bootstrap as
Yeah.
a CSS framework,
Uh-huh.
and
Oh, I love
God,
Bootstrap. Yeah. I'm a big fan of Bootstrap. Yeah. Without
yeah,
Bootstrap, I'm a horrible web developer. Bootstrap makes me look good.
yeah,
Bootstrap is like, yeah, no, I love it.
yeah. And
Yeah.
I didn't understand that. I was like, oh, I
Yeah.
need to do everything from scratch.
Right. Yeah.
But I think it was a naive approach, but it was a good approach, especially
Mhm.
starting out,
Yeah.
because what happens is when I got through and I built my whole thing in my own HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and my
Uh-huh.
PHP, like I did it all myself. And
Yeah.
then afterwards, I started to see the reason that Bootstrap was there to
Mm-hmm.
be able to use. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I can do this a lot quicker if I
Mm-hmm.
use the framework. It already has these components built out, and I could just
Right.
call it in and use that stuff. I don't have to build it myself. But if I want to, I know how to do that myself as
Right.
well, right? So
Right.
that was a big things in terms of learning. But
And for the
also,
people,
well,
and if somebody hears the word bootstrap and they don't know what it is, like it's just a front end framework like that's pre-designed, like buttons are pre-designed, forms are pre-designed. It's made by Twitter, and it makes your site look, in my opinion, it just makes your site look modern without you having to mess with the design aspect. So it's consistent, it's modern, it's
mhm,
responsive, and you
yep.
don't have to do like spend and all this time creating the CSS for it. But yeah, go ahead.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. You have to, what it allows you is you, like when you're doing it yourself, you have to build those tools yourself for each
Hmm.
component that you're
Right.
doing, right? And make it look pretty. But Bootstrap is, oh, I'm just going to put it in, grab it, and then I can take these pieces and make it look pretty a lot quicker, right?
Right.
And you can
Exactly.
also go in if you start understanding the language itself,
Hmm.
like within setting up like SAS, which is
Hmm.
like the CSS, what is it, preprocessor.
Yeah.
Um, so you can go in and
Right.
actually override a lot of the settings in Bootstrap if you want to,
Right.
once you get to that point. Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, I was
Well, let me ask
but
you.
as well as like,
Yeah.
go ahead.
No, I was going to say, because you mentioned PHP and backend, just real quick,
Mhm.
what did you use the backend for? Because you were working on your portfolio page, right? So what you
Yeah.
added a backend
So
aspect, yeah.
so the backend aspect is so I could submit my form.
Okay,
So,
cool. Yeah,
and then
exactly.
in terms of like, I
Right,
had this idea in my head of
right,
building my own content management system
right.
too.
Oh wow,
That never
it's
came to
just
fruition. I never did that. But
oh
but
yeah,
I
you
also
should still
used
do it.
like I
Yeah,
set up a yeah, I also set up a database in
yeah.
MySQL so
Uh-huh.
I could build like tables and kind of get an idea of like how that aspect is and pull data from a table into my website. So
Hmm.
that's what I use that for the most part.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, the form part is yeah. It's funny because just yesterday I was gonna work on a video on how to get a Bootstrap template form to work the quickest way. Because
Yeah.
I don't know why it's so weird to just get a form to submit the information to an email that you specify.
Yep.
And
Yep.
like, and but anyway, so that's funny that you mentioned that, like the form and PHP is just like, that's like one of, would you say that's the quickest way to get like a dead form to work? Just add PHP? I mean, that's the quickest
Yep.
way I can think of.
Yeah, yeah. If you're using a server side language like
Yeah.
trying to get something to submit, I would say
Yeah.
PHP. Just
Yeah.
because what they have already built out, like PHP, just works on so many servers already, and it has a
Mm-hmm.
lot of stuff built into PHP, like
Mm-hmm.
submit, to submit,
Mm-hmm.
and then the whatever the email object that they have in there where you can submit to, which makes it like super easy to get up and running. Yeah, I agree.
Right. Yeah, exactly. That's what I've noticed. I don't know if there was something else out there, but I haven't found it, where like maybe there's an even quicker way to
Yeah.
submit a form. But yeah, okay, so you work on your portfolio, you added PHP to get the form to work and maybe a few other things, a couple other things. Okay, and then what happened?
So what I started to do is like, okay, I got to a certain point where I thought I was like, oh, competent in my skills.
Hmm.
So during the same time frame, I'm going to meetups and
Hmm.
talking with people that are in the industry as well at the
Hmm.
same time. So it's giving me an idea of like, oh, what do I need to do, and trying to keep my focus, because I was that same type of person to where,
Hmm.
oh, I read that I need Python or Java and whatever else. So
Right.
I
Yeah.
needed to keep my mind like straight into what I was doing. So
Right.
and make sure I like stuck with what I was going to do, which was the PHP, JavaScript, HTML,
Right.
CSS.
Yeah.
So and they're like, yeah, you need to keep working, keep building like projects and things like that.
Hmm.
And was going to meetups, talking to different people, as well as I started reaching out to recruiters around the 3 month mark, I believe,
Hmm. Hmm.
and I sent them my portfolio website, and I was asking them, "Hey, this is my portfolio website. What do you think? Like, what else do I need to start working on?"
Hmm.
And a lot of the recruiters were like really receptive to where
Yeah.
like, "Oh, hey, you need to work on your CSS or your HTML more and things
Uh-huh.
like that, and then come back to me when you get better within this aspect." And I was like, "Oh, how should I do that? How should I do that?"
Yeah.
And they were like, "Oh, you should build like more websites. So like
Right.
copy like a really hard website, like maybe like a ESPN, CNN, or BCC, and
Yeah.
build it without really looking at the code, right? Just build it
Okay.
from scratch, right? And
Hmm.
then you can add those to your portfolio if you needed to." So I took that, and instead of actually building those websites, I actually started reaching out to friends to see, oh, does someone need a website built? So
Hmm.
I could, and then I would do it for free, right? So
Hmm.
I can build up my portfolio while also maybe getting someone else a
Right.
website as well too,
Yeah.
right?
Right. That's a
So
great idea. Yeah. I
yeah.
love it. I tell that to my students too. Yeah, that's perfect. I think that's, well, yeah, why not do two things at the same time? Help somebody else for free while you're learning, and like everybody wins. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
awesome. Oh,
yeah.
one question real quick. So when you, as you said, after the 3 months mark, you reach out to recruiters with your portfolio. What
Mhm.
did you have in that portfolio? Did you add any projects
So
at that point, or no? Was it
no,
just a
no,
portfolio without?
it was just my portfolio page, and I was like, "Oh, I'm doing pretty
Oh,
good." I
that's
thought it looked
funny.
really well and stuff. It was,
That's fun.
but no,
I
it
love
was,
it. Yeah.
yeah.
That's
And
awesome.
I wish, I
Yeah.
wish I kept the design and
Yeah.
what I did for that portfolio, it
Yeah.
looks way different than what I have
Yeah.
up there now, right?
Yeah.
It's funny, the 3 months mark and the 6 months
Right.
mark was a complete like difference.
Yeah.
The first 3 months, I kind of made it look like a LinkedIn page. So I had
Uh-huh.
my picture up here
Okay.
with my description and things like that.
Right.
And then I had like my resume next to like a project that I built, both in
Okay.
like I took a screenshot
Uh-huh.
of the PDF or whatever it is, and then
Uh-huh.
you could download them if you clicked on them, and
Okay.
then just some description at the bottom and stuff like that. It was pretty much just one page.
Yeah.
I didn't have a contact form then or anything. I was
Okay.
like, oh, okay, I built something. Let me like reach
Right.
out and get some feedback on what I
Yeah.
built to see what I need to work on next,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's
So
how would you know, and like when you're new, there's a lot of things you don't know. So you still went about it perfectly. Like there is like I can't like how are you supposed to know like all these like oh I gotta add more full stack items to
yeah,
my portfolio page or whatever. Like
yeah,
these are things like so you did everything the right way. I love that. You reaching out to recruiters, you going well meetups is kind of interesting. I know people do that. I personally I don't know how I feel about it, but I know people it work for people work for you obviously. So it's a great thing that seems to be working.
yeah,
But it's
yeah,
you did everything like so far it seems like everything you did was the right way, and that's awesome because not a lot of people can do that because not a lot of people can they don't have the discipline, and they a lot of times also and we talked about this when we said that like it's easy to jump around between technologies because
yep,
you're trying to learn PHP and then all of a sudden somebody says no don't learn PHP learn this instead like
yeah, yeah,
and it's
yeah, yeah.
yeah
Because
like
there's it's so funny at the beginning, and you mentioned PHP.
right.
So many people were like, "Oh, don't do PHP."
Don't do
And in
PHP,
my
right?
mind, and it's
Right,
funny as a junior developer, I'm like,
right,
"Man, I shouldn't do PHP."
right,
I stuck with it, which was cool.
right,
But after I got my first job, the first thing I did was got out of PHP because
right,
I was like, "Man, no
right,
one likes PHP."
right. That's so
But
funny. Wow. That's actually the
there's so
very yeah.
uh,
No, I was
yeah,
gonna
yeah.
say
Go
that.
ahead.
Sorry, I was just gonna say like the very first time I tried web development because I got a computer science degree and people don't know this about computer science degree. I cannot stress this enough. They don't teach practical skills. They don't teach web development unless you take a
Yeah,
class, an elective. They don't do that. That people
yeah,
don't realize that you can come out of a CS degree and not know anything about web development. You can't design a web page. It's
yeah,
the weirdest thing. So my point is when I tried to learn web development, for me it was PHP the very first
yeah.
time. Now I look back at it, I'm like, oh, why did I try to do that?
But
Yeah.
the funny thing is, I think PHP is the one of the best ways to go because
Mm-hmm.
25. There was this number out there that 25% of the pages are built within WordPress
Mm-hmm.
and using some type of PHP.
Right.
So there's a lot of jobs out there for it if
Right.
you're good at it. Like it's not a bad way to go. It's
Right.
just the way the language is
Right.
compared to other languages, it's not as
Right.
clean. Like I
Right.
like working in
Right.
Python a lot more than I do in PHP.
Interesting. Okay.
But PHP, I can still get a ton done. So if
Yeah.
I'm doing a website for a client, I'm
Yeah.
gonna build it in PHP on top of WordPress. Like if
Right.
I'm working on a side project for someone, like
Right.
it's really easy.
Yeah. And how easy is it to get started with PHP? You rename the file to
Yeah,
.php. You have
yeah,
the opening bracket, the question mark, and that's
yeah,
it. You can have backend code just like that. That to me is
exactly.
nuts. Like, and
Yeah,
you have to have PHP obviously running.
yeah,
As a
exactly.
service.
But the thing is, every server,
Yeah.
every web server has PHP on there.
Yeah.
So as soon as you put a PHP file on there,
Yeah. Yeah.
as long as you have your DNS set up and
Right.
everything else, it's gonna
Right.
work. Like
I know.
it just works.
Right. I know. I was messing with that yesterday again. And I was like, holy crap, I just have to change the file name, just do this and that, and I can get the form to work, It's just, yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, yeah,
So it's
yeah.
not really, I guess
So
it's not a bad way to get started. Yeah, that's the point.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely. And your point about meetups,
Yeah.
I I think the meetups would be more once you they weren't bad as a
Hmm.
junior developer, but
Hmm.
I got more out of reaching out to recruiters and talking to my mentors about what I need to focus on, right? Because there's so
Yeah.
many different ideas at these meetups, and is you're just getting like content real quickly from people that you just met, right?
Right.
But I think focusing on your relationship with finding a mentor, I think is super important. If you so they can give you like guidance into where you
Yeah.
need to go, right? Instead
And
of like you go ahead.
how would somebody find a mentor? Like, I know that question is being posed on like all these coding sites or Reddit and all that stuff, and everybody has an opinion on it. But what do you think? Like, if somebody wants to learn coding, they want to find a mentor, like what would you recommend?
I would recommend it could be any look first within your community, like people you know, your network. If you
Right.
have someone who's
Right.
doing a job in there, and if you can't find it there, start looking at like people. Like there's so many different people out there who want to help in some way. So
Right.
like someone might post on Reddit, and you can reach out to someone there on Reddit. Or there's these different camps that people do for free as a programmer. They want to give back to what they're doing, so trying to research those areas. Or even at a meetup, like, oh, if you meet someone that's really cool that's teaching up front and stuff, like, hey, can I reach out to you when I have like questions about these different items?
Yeah.
Join a community on Slack, you know,
Right.
and be like, hey, I'm looking for a mentor. This is where I'm trying to get to.
Mm-hmm.
Just don't be afraid to reach out. That's the
Right.
biggest thing. People are willing to help, but you got to
Right.
put yourself out there. Don't
Right.
don't be afraid to get denied either. If someone says no, it's fine. Go on to the next person, right? You just have
Right.
to keep
Yeah.
that persistence. It's the same thing as with coding, learn to code.
Right.
Like I remember I was putting in, 10, 12, 14 hours at
Mm-hmm.
some points at a time
Mm-hmm.
so I can break through to get better to understand like what's happening, what I'm doing in my code. Like I remember some
Yep.
CSS stuff wasn't working properly. I look back out at it now, and it take me like 5 minutes, but
Right.
took me like days, weeks sometimes to figure it out. I
Yeah.
didn't understand why index.html was named index.html
Right.
and
Yeah.
why it had to be called that. Like,
Right.
why aren't these pages being read correctly? It
Right.
took me a week to figure that stuff out, right?
Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah.
So,
No, the struggle. Yeah. For
yeah,
sure. Like a lot of these things. Like I remember even just when I started with Java, for the longest time, I remember just memorizing in Java. There's just the main function, the starting point. It's very long.
yep,
It's like public static
yep,
void main string args. It's like really long, really weird,
yep,
and it has to be exactly like that. Like it cannot
yep,
be any other way. The program will not work. I just remember how weird that was to me. I'm like, and I just memorized it. I didn't know all the parts. I didn't know what static was. I
yep,
didn't, like I didn't understand it. But like now I'm like, oh, over. So sometimes I guess the point here is sometimes you just have to like, just roll with it. Like if they're saying
yep,
it has to be called index.html, don't try to figure out everything all at once, like every
yeah,
detail, because you're going to get
yeah,
stuck. It's like you
yep,
can't move forward. Sometimes you just got to
yep,
go with it. And then down the road, things will kind of like connect, and
yep.
that's my experience. Would you say that that's accurate?
I agree. I would say, understand what you need to understand. And
Right.
that's kind of hard, right? Telling a junior
Yeah.
developer to
Yeah.
understand what you need to understand.
Right.
But kind of get it to work, and then you can go and play around with why it needs to be that way to work, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you can do that later on. It doesn't have to be right away at that point. Move on to the
Mm-hmm.
next thing, move on to the next thing. Give your brain some time to rest. That's a big thing too, is making sure your
Yes.
brain is
Yes.
rested when you're doing this
Oh
stuff.
yes, yes, absolutely. Oh my God, I rest maybe too much now, but like it
Yeah,
works. I rest. I
yeah,
don't go into a coding rabbit hole.
yeah, yeah.
That when you're a
So
new developer, it's the worst. When
yeah,
you're just like
yeah,
obsessed with something and you just go dark, like you go deeper and deeper into it. It's like you
yeah,
just gotta like be able to get good at like, okay, I'm doing something wrong. Let me back off. Let me
yeah,
try a different approach.
exactly.
Yeah.
Take a step back and then come back to it. Let your brain. I even now I struggle with it. I've been in the industry for about 5 years now, and I
Right.
still struggle with. Oh man, I really want to understand why this
Right.
isn't working the way it needs to be. Right.
Right.
But
Yep.
then you're like, oh, practical me is like, oh, I need to get this project done
Right.
because this is I have a deadline to hit.
Right.
Right. So
Yeah.
no, there's definitely a balancing act.
Right. And yeah, so back to meetups and
Yeah.
reaching out. I think you made me realize that I need to reach out more often because of what I'm trying to do in my personal life. I realized, like, just you just talking about it again just reminded me what I needed to do. I'm trying to build a certain type of connection or circle around me, and I think that one thing that I've not been doing is reaching out to build that circle. and
Yeah.
and you just made me like realize, like, you know what, I'm going to do that. I'm going to reach out to the people that I either look up to or I want to work with on a project, and just start a conversation and just ask, maybe for advice, or maybe, you obviously, it doesn't have to be said, but it's assumed that, just be, as long as you're polite and as long as you're genuine, I think people, like you said, are very receptive. They're very, like, especially LinkedIn. I'm a fan of LinkedIn. From all other things, I think LinkedIn is great. And
Yep.
so if you're interested in a company or a job, reach out to a developer. And this is something that I've heard from my coding bootcamp experience when I was going through one,
Yep.
that they would kept, they said, like, reach out to a developer that already works there and just ask them how they got where they got, and they're actually very nice, and I
Yeah.
had positive experience in the past doing that. I did it a couple of times, and both times it was very positive. The person was very helpful. Eventually that person, when I was looking for a job, that person eventually reached back out to me after a few months and said, hey, are you still looking for a job? We're hiring.
Yeah.
And so it's like, it works. It really does work.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It
absolutely.
definitely does work. That I would say that is the number one thing alongside of learning,
Right.
is being able to be open and reaching out and not being afraid to do that. Because not everyone might not have that same experience as you,
Right.
and someone reached back out to them. But more times than not, someone's going to reach back out to you. And even if it's not more times than not, it could be even 30%. And
Right.
that's still a good breakthrough, because you're building those connections and people know you're serious. Right.
Yes.
So,
Yes, absolutely. And I think people want to help, like you said, want to give
yeah.
back. That whole idea
Yep.
of people want to help. They, if you're genuine, if you are honest and straightforward, people
Yeah.
will like respond, and they will, whatever it is, even if they can't help you. Like this person I reached out to, they weren't hiring at the time,
Yeah.
but he thought of me 3 months later. That's to
Yep.
me blew my mind, because like, I don't know this guy, and I reached out to him. I didn't think he would like come back to me in 3 months letting me know that they're hiring and are willing to consider me as a candidate. So that to me
Yeah.
was very like, made me think. I'm like, oh, people are actually pretty cool, like people,
Yeah.
like, don't be
Yeah.
scared, like that they might,
Yeah.
ignore you. Like, I personally deal with a lot of different types of people when it comes to tutoring, and I'm not gonna lie, there's some people that are just easier to respond to or work with. There's some
Yep.
people that are just very, come across very, um I don't know, I don't want to use the right term here, but they're not, they didn't put a lot of effort or time into the message. Like, they sent out a
Yeah.
message like, hey, help now project, you can't, like, I want to help, and I do a lot of things for free. I have this website called askaven.com where people ask
Yeah.
coding questions, and I actually help for free. I love
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
because I know
Yeah.
how it is, and like, they could tip me if they like. There's a tip jar. But like,
Yeah.
my point is, like, I'm amazed at like how many people want help, but they fail to like just put a little bit more effort in, like, just being genuine and be more complete with their request, like, hey, my name
Exactly.
is so, just being polite or professional,
Yeah. Being grateful
yeah.
that someone's willing, like, coming at an approach is like, oh, this person is taking time out of their busy schedule or even their time to give me. And that's one of the things is you got to remember how valuable time is, right? You're never going to be able to get time back, right?
Right.
So if someone's even willing to put a minute into like giving you feedback on something,
Right.
like, you should be I feel like you should be grateful for that and really appreciate that person.
Absolutely, just a mere thank you. Like,
Yeah.
I on this website is one of the most interesting, I feel like, experiments that I've ever done, because I'm helping for free. It throws people off, first of all, because some people are like, is this legit? Is he really, like, what's the story? But I don't. I just wanted to help. I just wanted to, like, create this platform. People ask coding questions and I try my best to answer them. If they're too
Yeah.
complex, I tell them like, hey, this is beyond my scope. I don't think I can help with that. Sorry. That's it.
Yeah.
But it's amazing to me that, just a simple thank you. How much, for me, if you just say thank you and please,
Yeah.
and you just say, I would appreciate your help. That's it. I'm happy.
Yeah.
Like, you know what, you appreciate it. That's fine. At this point, that's all I want, and
Yeah.
yeah, it's funny. It's the simple things. Yeah.
Yeah, it helps you go like above and beyond. It's like, okay, I know the position I was in, right?
Yeah.
I was really struggling when I was trying to learn and stuff. And I
Mhm.
want to let people know like it's not going to be a cakewalk,
Right.
but I'm willing to help you get to that point. But you need to put in the effort as well too. Like you said,
Right.
is that effort you put in is really important as well because if I'm going through and I
Right.
just worked on something for about an hour and I'm going
Right.
back, oh, I can't figure it out. You need to like you don't know the effort that it's going to take to get you to become a professional. You're going to have to put in like let's say you're working full time. You're going to
Mhm.
have to put in at least like 4 hours a day. If you want to get a job within 6 months to a year.
Right.
If you're trying to or let's say you're stopping your job and you're just concentrating on this. It's
Right.
better to put in 8 hours, but
Right.
like sometimes you got to put in 10 hours, 12 hours, 14 hours, like really
Right.
grinding to be
Uh-huh.
able to get your brain to really open up into the concepts within programming. Like it's not an easy thing. Like you really have to break that habit of that instant gratification type of learning, I guess, and
Right.
really like dig deep inside your brain when you don't want to keep going. Like your brain
Wow.
gets
Yeah.
it's not even like it's tired. It's like
Right.
started getting bored and frustrated.
Right. Yeah.
So you take a step back, take 15 minutes and go back to it, grind some more. Like
Right.
and getting your that grit built up into your brain
Right.
is really good as a programmer. It just allows you to be like, oh, okay, uh, I can grind through whatever I need to because I can go through it for like hours at a time,
Hmm.
and actually make breakthroughs when I need to, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And patience and being kind towards yourself, so
Yeah.
important. Because
Yeah.
if you are harsh on yourself and you're impatient, or you're impatient, learning, it makes the learning a lot more difficult. If you're just trying to, like, because I'm teaching new students. I have this class, and one thing is that I've noticed is people always want to be like, oh, I already know arrays, I already know strings, let's move on. And they don't know it. I know they
Yeah.
don't know it,
Yeah.
because down the road we'll just do something that involves arrays and strings, and they don't know
Yeah.
it. And I'm like, we can't rush it. We have to get through the
Yeah.
fundamentals, and we have to, like, kind of like, you have to be patient with yourself, because it's not,
Yep.
it takes time, but it also takes patience, and it takes, not being too harsh on yourself, when you mess up,
Uh,
because it's like you judge yourself like, oh man,
yeah.
like, it's like, I feel there's so many times people feel stupid, for sure. This
Yeah.
this industry will make you feel stupid. There's
All
no
all
doubt
the
about
time.
it. It
Yeah.
is like,
It's
it just
funny.
comes with the territory.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yesterday, it's funny. Last week, I'm helping someone with their website, right?
Hmm.
I'm helping them, they're coding it in PHP. So
Hmm.
I'm helping them code. I'm going through and doing all my stuff. And
Right.
then I miss a semicolon. So every time I'm coding, I'm missing semicolons and he's
Hmm.
pointing it out. I was
Hmm.
like, yeah, like
Right.
it's,
Right.
I'm going to miss those. That's just how it
Right.
is. Like, and
Right.
so it's
Right.
just, you go back, look at it. Oh, okay. The editor's telling me I'm missing a semicolon on 9,
Right.
whatever it is. Okay, let me
Right.
go add it there, right? And
Right.
before, when I was first doing it,
Right.
as more of a junior to mid-level, like a
Hmm.
associate type programmer, I
Hmm.
would be really hard on myself. Like, man, I'm so
Right.
dumb. Like, I missed that.
Right.
Like, this is
Right.
so easy to do, but
Right.
everyone misses semicolons. It's just how it is.
Oh my God, you just touched on one of the most important aspects, and that is, when people watch me program all the time, and I make mistakes all the time, but they realize that that's part of it. They
Yeah,
realize you're not expected to be perfect or
yeah,
memorize things. They'll see me look up things all the time. I look
yeah,
up the most basic things, because, like,
yeah,
this is not the medical industry. This is not where you memorize medical terms. This is
yeah.
not it. This is where you
No,
Google stuff. You know,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
don't need to memorize it. You don't need to like, that's not what you show off and shine. I know there's some programmers out there that are just insane. They just
yeah,
memorized everything that they, you know, they can do
yeah,
anything. Like they remember all the built-in functions. They know how to
yeah,
use them. And that's
yeah,
impressive. I'm not going to lie.
yeah,
That's not me.
yeah,
And there's a lot of
yeah,
programmers like me that just look up things, you know, like it could be the smallest thing, like, you know, converting
yeah.
from one type to another. Let me just see how it's done in Java again. Because I keep going between Java and
Exactly.
JavaScript. Yeah, and I just look it up,
Yeah,
and it's like I tell my students
yeah,
that's okay.
yeah. That's not a problem at all. If
Yeah.
you see my notes when I'm programming,
Mhm.
I have a repository
Mhm.
just for things that I don't want to remember. So it's just like
Yeah.
so I look up stuff all the time, like you were saying,
Yeah.
like, oh, okay, oh, I'm in Python. I was like, oh, I
Yeah.
forgot. How do I figure out what type this variable,
Right.
what type this thing is here?
Right.
So, oh yeah, it's type and it's super simple. And I look it
Right.
up probably like every time I go back to it because
Right.
first of all, I don't use it that often. And second of all, it's just like, man, I don't want to memorize this stuff. Like you
Right.
understand concepts, so you know how to program, but you don't
Mhm.
need to memorize the nuances of like, oh, what you know what it is, so you
Right.
can Google it real quickly and bring
Right.
it up pretty quickly, right?
Right. And yeah, and another thing I would like to point out is Googling is a skill, and you get
Yeah,
better at it over time. I sucked at it at the beginning because when you don't know a language or framework, you don't know how to phrase it. So you phrase it
yeah,
incorrectly. You're looking through the search results and you can't like, and you try different things. It's not working. It's because the search is wrong to begin with. It's not the results
yeah,
that you're using. It's because
yeah,
the term was something else. It was maybe casting,
yeah,
not converting, or something
yeah,
like that. You know, and you just
exactly.
realize, you know, and yeah, so that's the other thing, like getting better at Google searches. Because I see my new developers, my students, like try to like look up something real quick, and I already know they're gonna mess it up, like because they're like, oh, it's gonna be easy. I saw Avon do it, so I'm gonna do it real quick too. And it's just
Yeah,
because they use the wrong term. I'm like, oh, you know, maybe you should add this term to it, add jQuery, because
yeah,
it's like it's not vanilla JavaScript. It's we're using jQuery, so let's do it the jQuery way, not the JavaScript way. You know?
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, no, I agree with you 100%. It's like, and knowing how to Google, you hit the nail on the head there. Because right, I'm coding in JavaScript
Mm-hmm.
and I'm doing an anonymous function, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in JavaScript, it's oh, I'm doing an anonymous function, but I go into Python, it's like a lambda. So
Mm-hmm.
if you know that the term is lambda right off the back,
Right.
then you can get to where
Right.
you need to be quicker and whatever your Googling is.
Right.
And the thing is most of the time someone before you has done this thing.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're
Right.
really good at Googling,
Right.
then you can get that result. But if you're not, you're like, man, no one has done this. It's like, no, you're just not
Right.
Googling it
No,
right.
that's a good point. Yes, no one has ever asked this question. No one ran into this problem ever before.
Yeah,
No, that's
yeah,
probably not the case.
yeah,
You probably there's every error message that you get, somebody else got that error message.
yeah,
It's almost impossible unless it's a brand new update on a package and it's
yeah,
the first time this bug comes up. It's there's a good chance
yeah.
somebody already a Stack Overflow answer. And by the way, Stack Overflow, what's your take?
I love Stack Overflow. The thing is, you just gotta be careful
Mhm,
um, about just copying and pasting code too.
mhm.
I what I like is I like to go through and understanding the code that I'm taking from there. So
Okay.
I'll replace variable names
Mhm,
with what I'm using and things like that, and kind of print console logging if you're in JavaScript, like
mhm.
logging out what's happening at each step. So I understand like what's going on, so I can go
Yeah,
back and
right.
kind of so I can go back and manipulate that whatever I'm working with within the Stack Overflow thing. If I'm just trying to get something real quick and I
Mhm.
don't care, I'll just copy and paste it.
Yeah.
But if
Mhm.
I'm trying to get better as a developer,
Right.
it's good to go in and kind of analyze that code. And
Interesting. Yeah.
yeah, and the same thing with source code, right? With like
Right.
jQuery, you talked
Right.
about jQuery, right?
Right.
After that person gets better at jQuery and they really
Mhm.
want to start breaking that stuff down, they start
Right.
learning vanilla JavaScript.
Right.
So what you can do then is
Mhm.
like, oh, I'm getting better at vanilla JavaScript. Let me go back into jQuery and
Mhm.
actually read the source code for it
Mhm.
so I can understand what
Mhm.
selector thing is doing, so I can do multiple selectors within the same bracket there.
Mm-hmm.
Or if I'm understanding what the dot class method is in jQuery is doing,
Mm-hmm.
you know. But that's
Right.
afterwards. Like you don't have to do
Mm-hmm.
that right away. That's when you're starting to get more in depth
Mm-hmm.
knowledge of the actual concepts of the language itself, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
and you touched and you said like you don't just like copy paste, and especially if it's in a professional setting, obviously,
Yeah.
that's more important than if personal setting. Like if you're working on
Yep.
a personal project, it's slightly different
Yeah.
than
Definitely.
if you have an employer and your code is being shared with other programmers. You got to be able, like, if you can't comment on your code and explain what it is, then that's a sign that maybe you need to like review the code. But I also realized, you just reminded me that when I first started learning web development and looking up things on the internet, that a lot of times that was an issue, like just getting something to work blindly, just copy pasting and see if it works. I
Yeah.
realize now that doesn't happen as often anymore. I guess that's a good sign. Like meaning like I could like look up an answer and I know what it, well, I'm like, oh, okay, that's how you do it. Like
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
you see the answer, like, oh, okay, cool. So
It,
that's interesting because I just reminded me of my the beginning days more.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what I did too as well. I
Yeah.
remember I looked at some code back when I made my hamburger menu on
Hmm.
my website, and it
Hmm.
was in jQuery. And I
Right.
just like, oh, I needed something to work. So I copied
Hmm.
and pasted it in. I was like,
Hmm.
oh, it's working. I got it to work. But
Hmm.
now when I look stuff up, you're
Hmm.
right. It's like,
Hmm.
oh, I don't mind copying and pasting this thing
Right.
because I know exactly what's happening there. Like
Yes,
I can
exactly.
read the code,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly. You can't feel, you can't overdo it. Like you can't just
Yeah.
be like, if the like, don't overthink it. If the code makes sense to you,
Yeah.
then just roll
Yeah.
with it. Don't try to be
Exactly.
like, oh, let me spend an extra hour on like understanding every single if
Yeah.
there's something like that doesn't make sense either. So you have to like get good
Yeah.
at like just, yeah, exactly. That's a skill in itself. Just like Googling is a skill, selecting an
Yep.
answer is a skill. That
Yep.
all comes with time. That comes
Yep.
with practice, not just time, but actually doing it. Actually, probably more important. A lot of people forget
Yeah.
that because they watch YouTube videos and they
Yeah.
forget that you still have to do it.
Yeah.
I see a lot of my
Doing
students do that.
doing it is super important, and not even in just in tutorials, right? You got
Right,
to get at just copying tutorials.
right.
You have to, like, let's say you're building this light box or like a
Mhm,
slider or something
mhm.
like that on your
Right.
website, or even like a grid with like images in it. Like
Mhm.
copy the tutorial, but then come back and do it yourself again, right?
Right.
You can't just like do it at the tutorial level. Like it's like a muscle you're building up. You have to do it multiple times to be able to get really good at that skill. It's the same type of thing.
Absolutely. And yeah, no, and what I recommend, what I do personally that helped me a lot is change one thing. Like get code from the tutorial, whatever. Just do one thing. Like change, like add one more, add a nav bar if it doesn't have one, or add whatever. Just that one change, it's amazing. And is because you need to understand the code enough to make that change, to integrate it. And it's amazing how much you learn there. But also, isn't that what a job is, like a software developer job? You place in front of a code, and then you're supposed to change one thing. And they usually start you off like very small. Like we need to change, we need you to change, and it's usually at the beginning. It's probably something tedious where they make you do all the
Yeah,
crappy stuff that none of the other developers wanted to do, that they've been
exactly.
procrastinating. Like, yeah,
Yeah,
it's time for us to change from a 4-digit year to, or from 2-digit year to a 4-digit year. Then you have to go through the code and all that crap.
yeah,
So like, but that's how you learn, just little changes here and there. And I wish I knew this before. I wasted a lot of time just going the wrong path. Now just getting a boilerplate template and just changing it is, for me, it's one of the best ways to learn. And again, I'm still a beginner too. I'm still, even though because even though I got a CS degree, I went through coding boot camp, and I've been tutoring for 2 years, but I still feel like it's amazing. Maybe it's that permanent insecurity that comes with this territory. Every
yeah,
developer will feel insecure.
yeah. I'm. It's funny that you say that because you're always learning,
Mhm.
so you're you're gauging your skills against other people's skills all the time to be like,
Right.
man, I'm really not like this person can really
Right.
code over here.
Oh
Like
yeah.
me, I'm like, oh
Oh
man,
yeah.
I guess I'm doing okay. But
Right.
I don't I think it comes with time. that you understand, like, okay, I can do this thing, but this person isn't really strong as this.
Right.
So I could help within this area. Oh, these are the skills I need to increase in. So I need
Right.
to like really work on these type of data structures or algorithms
Wow.
and things like that.
Right.
But like you said, when you first
Right.
start your job, like usually if they're a good company, they'll get you to where they start putting you in little pieces of code
Hmm.
to build up your confidence and your skills and everything else, and your so you start understanding the code base more and more. And then they'll be like, oh, okay, here's a bigger challenge here, this to get
Right.
this to stretch you just a little bit, right?
Right.
And then you'll build confidence there and you'll get past that, right? And
Right.
then that's how it is really good to like really when you get into a company, if they're a
Right.
good company, they'll build you in those ways.
Yeah.
If it's a company that's kind of like they're looking for like a more mid-level
Right.
type of developer and they put you in that context, it's gonna hurt. Like
Right.
it's gonna be painful for you to get in there and really like show what you're trying to show because you're just starting to learn. Like
Right.
it's just a harder situation to be in as a
Hmm.
junior developer, right?
Right.
Um, but yeah, so I don't know. It's I
Right.
feel like it's you want to take whatever position you can when you're first
Right.
starting. Like it's just
Right.
that's just the reality of the situation. But
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
yeah, try to make the best of it, even if it's a harder position.
Right.
Just unless it's like taking on like your mental health, like you
Right.
don't have to pay attention to that. But
Right.
if you can feel like you can get through it and you can put more time into it because you're just starting to learn and get
Yeah.
into that context, like
Right.
maybe pushing yourself a little bit harder to try to like uh,
Wow.
get there quicker. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's you yeah, and that's that's a whole nother topic to explore about your first
Yeah,
job and what
yeah,
to look for. And you mentioned not don't be picky. I agree. When you
yeah,
first, because you want it, so you kind of can't be
yeah,
picky,
yeah,
you want to become a developer, especially if you're not CS background and not you're self-taught like you cannot be picky at all. And
yeah,
then but yeah, you're absolutely right. And like my last company that I worked for, and I'm not a 9 to 5 person. I realize that. It's just something about it. I personally, it's just to me, it's just was never my thing. I think maybe I didn't find the right company. Maybe that's the thing. I don't know. I don't know all the answers, and I don't know. I'm learning about myself as as I'm tutoring and all these things, and like, um, but but yeah. Anyways, my last company, one thing I realized was that they didn't have any documentation. It was a huge code base, and
yeah,
there was only one senior developer that could ask for question. And obviously, you cannot ask that person 100 questions a day, which I wanted to. Like I
yeah,
was stuck all the time, and I wanted to ask him, but you obviously have like crap. I can't bother him. So you
yeah,
have to like spread out. You have to be very smart at when you ask the question.
yeah,
You have to kind of like like you have to ask yourself, you have to stop yourself, like, okay, do I
yeah,
really need to ask this question right now? It seems like I need to get an answer, or can it wait?
yeah,
And maybe, let me try something else first. But that
yeah,
was, even though it's bad for a company not to have documentation for their code and not enough guidance, but at the same
yeah,
time, it's also a benefit because you kind of have to, it's like working out. You can have an
yeah,
easy workout, or you can do CrossFit or something crazy like that.
yeah,
That was my CrossFit, because it was just like this crazy code base that I had to figure out on my own. And then they
yeah,
expected me to like contribute on a meaningful level, like after like 3 months, and I'm like freaking out,
yeah,
So, but yeah, so my point is, I guess if you're a new developer and you got a job and the code seems tough, it's not necessarily a bad thing.
yeah,
That might be a good thing. It might make you a much better developer, just having to figure out, reverse engineer the system and kind of figure things out that way.
yeah.
Yeah. So,
Um, but yeah, to get back into your like after like talking to recruiters and things like
mhm,
that, bringing
right.
it back.
Yeah.
After my 3 month mark, I started getting a lot of good feedback from people,
Mhm.
and that's when I really start shaping my portfolio website the way it is now. Actually, I haven't changed it since I got in my first job, and
Okay.
so um, I built a couple of free websites for a couple of people. That
Okay.
was
Nice.
Yeah, so that was pretty cool. I was able to, and I did the same thing. I built them all both in PHP,
Mm-hmm.
HTML, CSS, JavaScript. I started getting a lot better within that context.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually I started reaching out to recruiters a lot more when I got something that I thought, oh, this looks like these websites like pretty good like them.
Yeah.
And I started getting a lot better feedback from recruiters about my
Okay.
portfolio website. They're like,
Mm-hmm.
oh yeah, go ahead and apply. Let's get you in the
Mm,
pipeline, right? Let's
okay.
start getting you to take our coding challenges and things like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's funny, like it was like, oh, no interviews, and then I
Right.
had like I was going through like 4 or 5 interviews
Right.
at this time. But the thing
Yeah.
is, what I did is I looked up the top new tech companies in Charlotte,
Mm-hmm.
right? And top 50 companies in
Mm-hmm.
Charlotte, and looked to see if they had positions there.
Hmm.
I looked up just as many companies that I could. I just had them on a list, and I was going through checking off one by one, like that I applied to them and when and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that I applied to a good I would say like 200 companies before I got my
Oh wow.
job at that point. Yeah. So like I was going through
Wow.
interviews, but at the same
Right.
time that I was applying, I
Yeah.
was still building up my skills. I was like, I
Yeah.
start concentrating like 20%
Yeah.
on applying to jobs and maybe
Right.
80% on coding. So I can
Yeah.
still keep building my skill set
Right.
as I'm going and looking for jobs too as well. Um, and
Yeah.
that was definitely interesting. But you have to reach out. Like it's not going to come to you. Like once
Two
you go ahead.
200. I just want to say
Yeah,
that I think people need to realize what that means. Most people cannot handle 199 rejections. You know, they can't.
yeah,
I can't. Me included. I
yeah,
suck at it too. I maybe the most I've applied, and because I've been spoiled, because all the jobs that I got were offered to me. I never reached out, like it, so they came to me. So I'm definitely, without a doubt, very spoiled in that regards. But people don't realize, because I see a lot of people give up on applying after they finish a boot camp or something, after maybe like 20 jobs, 30 jobs, because they're like, oh, that's it. Then no one wants me.
yeah,
So they get in that mindset, and it's very easy to do. So when you mention 200, I think that's a very important number that people need to understand. 200, that's 199 times that people said no to you. So can you keep going? Can you still like apply and have the energy and the motivation to apply? That's not easy to do. And people don't realize this, because if I ask my
and,
students like how many jobs have you applied after they gave up, they're probably going to say at most 30. And
yeah.
like, so 200 is a pretty big number. Yeah.
Yeah. No, the
Awesome.
thing is, you just have to realize, like, oh, I'm new to the industry. First of
Yeah.
all, you have to have, if you don't have code to show and things like that,
Mhm.
I feel like you're really setting yourself back. You
Yeah.
definitely need at least a portfolio or a
Hmm.
GitHub or something with some code so you can show.
Right.
Um, because if they're seeing you, oh, they someone told this to me, a senior developer. They said, oh,
Right.
if I see someone that came out of a boot camp
Yeah.
and that's where their green GitHub green dot stopped, and they
Hmm.
didn't do anything afterwards,
Interesting.
they're not continuing. Like
Okay.
that's it, right? Like
I've heard rumors about that. Yeah.
yeah.
I've heard
So
that employers look at the GitHub activity. Yeah.
yeah, definitely, especially if you're like a it depends, right? If you're a CS degree, it's kind of
Yeah.
different because you went through
Right.
the 4 years, so that's a pretty hard grind to do.
Right.
And but when it comes to a boot camp, I feel like it's going to be more scrutinized. Or even you're
Yeah.
being self-taught, you're going to be
Right.
more scrutinized
Yeah.
because it's a different path for you to get to that point to get a job.
Right.
So you really have to show like, oh, I'm learning and I'm growing as a
Yeah.
developer, even though I don't have a job. Like,
Yeah.
but you have to do that in parallel. So it makes it harder because you have to do that in parallel as you're applying to jobs
Right.
and wanting to get better as a programmer, because you have to reach out and be like, oh, okay, we don't want you at this time. We don't want you at this time. I think
Yeah.
I got rejected by the same company like maybe 3 or 4 times during that point. Oh, they
Wow.
had this job. Oh, they had that job. So I was
Right.
like, I was like, okay, this looks like it could be good, you know.
Hmm.
Um, but you have to go in every avenue. Like I was on Indeed, LinkedIn,
Hmm.
Dice was another one. I was
Right.
on looking at Craigslist to see if they
Right.
had any like entry
Wow.
level things. So you just
Yeah.
when you're first breaking in, you have to look at all avenues. You can't like hold back. Like you can't be passive
Right.
when it comes to that thing
Right.
because that's that's what you're building this thing for this whole
Right.
6 8 months or whatever year that you're working on. Like
Right.
you can't be passive in that. You can't be
Right.
like, oh, if you get rejected, you have to be like, just get, you know, it has to be like short term, like, oh, that
Right.
sucked. All right, let's go to the next one. Let's go to the next one. And
Right.
it's I'm not saying it's easy to do that, but you
Right.
have to get to that mindset if
Right.
you're going to want to be successful. Like you have to be able to
Right.
embrace that rejection and be like, oh, it's just someone saying
Right.
no. Like at the end of the day, that's all it is, right? It's
Right.
like, oh, someone said no to me. All right, I'm not gonna take, like, that doesn't define me. Like I'm gonna keep going
Right.
and keep pushing myself. Right.
That is wow. That is so important that I think that like I think every new developer needs to hear more of, and myself included. And part of the reason why we give up so easily or we don't put in the effort is also our ego got hurt, right? We're like, oh, they said no, and somehow we think like that's it's a personal judgment against you. It's nothing personal, you know, when a company says no. You know, I've heard many companies that I applied for didn't get it, but their reasons were actually very good. You know, they said that you would be perfect, you know, if you had this one skill or if this or that. Like it's always off by a little bit, you know. It's
Yep.
not because like they judge you like absolutely completely, you know, it's not that you can't become a developer. It's just for that particular time, for that particular position, for what they had in mind, you might not have everything that they wanted,
Yeah.
you know.
y-
And but there's
Exactly.
some there there's but there's so many companies out there with different types of people, different types of requirements, and you have to believe that it's not, you know, you have to like, okay, there has to be a position out there that fits my skill set. And you know, and that's, yeah, but that is so important because I'm helping somebody trying to get a job right now in this moment. And a lot of the things that you said are things that I'm hoping this person will realize. You know, that person was very slow in creating a portfolio, and getting the LinkedIn, you know, updated and all that stuff. And then it's
Yeah.
just taking a long time too. And I'm like, you just got to get these things out of the way because next thing you know, it's 6 months, a year, 2 years, and you haven't updated anything and you haven't applied. And it's just, you kind of like, of course you're
Yeah.
going to get deep, you know, not motivated,
Yeah.
you're going to lose motivation. And
It's super important to have visibility with what you want, right? Like LinkedIn, I tell everyone, hey, LinkedIn is like
mhm,
your best friend when it
yeah,
comes to the professional
I
experience.
agree.
When because
I
that
think it's the
when
future.
someone
Yeah.
searches you, yeah,
Yeah.
when someone searches for you, that's the
Yeah.
first thing I feel like they might look for, especially as a
Right.
developer. Look at your LinkedIn, see, um, even if you don't have experience as a developer, like you can put your, you know, what you went through, like your boot camp or whatever else it may be, and
Right.
put where you're trying to get to, right? It can be super relevant to a job you're trying to get, even if
Right.
you're not a developer. Or, you know, put your freelance skills up there. Like, okay, I started building these websites for
Hmm.
people. So you can
Hmm.
put that in your experience because that's
Right.
what you did do. You
Right.
did build these portfolio websites for people
Right.
as freelance experience. Like that's not a problem. It's not, and you
Right.
say exactly what you did. Like
Right.
you were saying, be super. You you're not lying. You're just saying,
Right.
oh, I did. I know exactly what
Yes.
I put there is what I put on my resume, right?
Right.
And someone's gonna be like, oh, okay, this person, they took their time out, they put all their skills on LinkedIn.
Right.
Um, they know exactly what they know what
Right.
they don't know. And
Yes.
maybe I want to talk to this person. I want to maybe take a shot on them. They would be maybe a really good asset to my company as like a, oh, maybe an IT person. You can come in and then switch to becoming a developer, or you're a junior and you're coming in, you're taking like little things here and there, you know. Like there's there I feel like there's a lot of people who would take a chance on person who really shows drive
Right.
to getting things done.
Absolutely. Yeah, you are just the perfect example for a self learner. I really, I feel like everybody needs to hear this. That's trying to become a developer. The struggle is, you know, it's there, and it's not easy to become a developer. And but everything you did and you said, in my experience, limited experience, is true. I've noticed the same things, and yeah. So right now, tell us about, maybe you can like tell us a little bit about the position you're currently in. What do you
Okay.
do? Is that your first position, or this
No,
this is
no.
not?
This is my fourth position.
Oh
So
wow! I don't know
yeah,
why I
yeah,
thought. Okay, cool. I thought that was
yeah,
your first one. Oh, okay,
no,
cool. So now,
no,
wow, you're already on your fourth one. That's like that
yeah.
means you're in. That's it. You're
So
yeah. Wow, that's
so
awesome.
yeah, I started at a company called T1V. Great
Uh-huh,
company.
uh-huh,
Still have a lot of really good friends there.
uh-huh.
Um, and that was my beginning entry level. It's so funny there.
Mhm,
I worked as a they have like proprietary software, so they have
mhm,
like an internal language that they
mhm,
have,
mhm,
that you can come in and kind of work in JavaScript. Is like a
mhm,
and I was like building out templates
mhm,
as well as using like that internal JavaScript
mhm,
to build out projects and stuff at the company.
mhm.
It was pretty cool. That like my understanding about it now is a lot more because I
Right.
understand like what they were trying to do with it, right?
Mhm,
So actually after there, I got a position at a company at a marketing agency,
mhm,
and they are called Might in Marketing, and
mhm,
really cool people there. Same type of thing. I was the first internal developer that they had there. Honestly,
mhm,
it was pretty crazy. I don't
mhm.
know. It was
Yeah.
cool, but there I was doing WordPress. I was doing Drupal. I
Mhm,
was doing internal type stuff. Um, I was like coming up with roadmaps, like architecting websites
mhm.
and things like that. But most of the stuff was in like I was managing like the server that they had there,
Right.
so I was doing like monitoring and things
Yeah.
like that. But it
Like
was
Linux.
really interesting. For me, it was really good learning, just trying to like making sure everything was working
Right.
properly, and I was giving good advice to like I was like the first point of entry when it came to advice for like
Hmm.
different items for like the WordPress websites. And by
Mhm,
that time, I've had about maybe four about 3 years experience with
mhm,
WordPress and CMS system. So that's what they use for the most part. So I felt
mhm.
like I had a good grasp on it, but I feel like I had a lot more that I could learn within there. Um,
Yeah.
but that it was just it was a good growing position for me, like in
Mhm,
terms of not just as a developer, but the communication with the team to making
mhm.
sure I can explain what I'm doing in a
Right.
non-technical aspect, right?
Mhm,
So that was pretty cool. Then after working at Maiden, I
mhm,
got a position at a company called Red Ventures,
mhm,
and they're a really cool company over here in Charlotte, North Carolina, but they're in South Charlotte, I guess
mhm,
considered like Fort Mill, South Carolina. But their
mhm.
campus, they have like 3,000, 4,000 people there.
Okay.
So it was a pretty big campus,
Mhm,
but so many good developers over there, like
mhm,
just good people in general. But
mhm,
there's so many people to learn from in terms of people who are like a lot senior than me.
mhm.
So for me working there, it allowed me to grow even more because I had so many people I can talk to and just get feedback from for my code,
Mhm,
right?
mhm,
When you're like when you're like a smaller company,
mhm,
it gives you a smaller pool to ask people from. Like you said, like, oh,
mhm.
I know they have their own work to do,
Right.
so I don't want to take too much of this same person's time. But
Right.
if you have a really large company,
Yeah, I know.
you can
You
like
can spread it out.
add more people.
I
Exactly.
know.
It gives you.
Yeah.
It's like,
Right.
oh, I don't feel as bad
Right.
because I'm not just asking that one
Right.
person. I'm asking a lot of people,
Right.
right?
Yeah. That's funny. Yeah.
So there, I was actually working in different technologies.
Mhm,
I worked in React over there,
mhm,
the front end framework. I worked in Vue a little bit over there. I
mhm.
worked in WordPress, same thing.
Uh-huh.
Worked in Node.js over there.
Uh-huh.
Um, so um, uh, uh, Yeah, I touched on a lot of things over there, but it
Right.
was really cool. Like I grew a lot
Mhm.
there as a developer, just in terms of like my
Right.
confidence
Yeah.
and getting feedback from a lot more senior people around me to help me like get a lot better. Uh,
Wow. So how long were you at each one of these companies?
so at T1V, I was there about 2 years.
Okay.
And oh, I forgot to hit on that. I was working in Python at T1V. That was really cool
Okay.
because honestly, right now, I would say Python is my favorite
Yeah.
language to code in
Yeah.
general. Um, and then at Maiden, I was there about a year. And
Okay.
then after Maiden, I was at Red Ventures for about 2 years.
Okay.
Um, and now I'm at my new company and I've been here for about a year.
Okay. And that's
Yeah.
usually, I think that that's very common amongst developers to be at a company for like a year, 2 years, and then explore a different company with different technologies, maybe.
Yeah.
And then sometimes you obviously like a company so much, you just stay with them for a long time,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
yeah.
Honestly, I like Red Ventures a lot. The only reason I left there was because I moved
Mhm.
and the commute was just really long. So
Okay.
yeah,
But
but
but once you have experience, it's
yeah,
incredible the options that you have, right? As a
yeah,
developer.
it's a lot easier. The funny thing is the contrast,
Yeah.
like I told you,
Right.
my when I was applying for jobs, my
Mhm.
first job, I
Right.
told you I applied
Exactly.
almost 100,
Hmm.
but the
Right.
job that I have currently,
Right.
I only applied to one job.
Right. Exactly.
So that's really cool. Like it's
It's
like
incredible. Yeah.
yeah, it's a lot different because
They
you're
want you. It changes from you wanting
yeah,
them to
yeah,
once you have the skills. This is
yeah,
the tech field is just where the companies will compete for you. It's not
yeah.
the other way around anymore,
Yeah,
and people don't
and
realize it.
it's like yeah, and you're right. It's like a mutual thing. It's like,
Yeah.
oh man, if especially if it's a good company,
Right.
like it was because I was really doing my research when I
Yeah.
left
Hmm.
Red Ventures because
Hmm.
I wanted a company like at least on the same par or even better than that.
Hmm. Right.
And when I was looking for jobs, I was like, oh, this looks like right up my alley. Oh, they're
Hmm.
straight in Python
Hmm.
on the back end. They got a good front end framework. They're in the machine learning and data analytics space. Like these are
Right.
all things I was like, oh, I really
Right.
like these things. So
Hmm.
that I was really being picky about where I wanted to be at. But you have the luxury of that once you start getting really good at your field and
Hmm.
understanding the programming in terms of concepts instead of
Hmm.
just memorizing,
Right.
because you can talk about the underlying like the internals and like the understanding behind something besides
Hmm.
just saying what this does. And they're like, oh, okay, this person, they're this level developer, this is what we want for our company and what we need at this point, right?
Hmm.
So
Right.
my current company is called Torcada,
Okay.
like data.
Hmm.
Um, and really like, man, it's so cool because everyone at the company is
Hmm.
just super smart. Like
Yeah.
we have um, we have around, I would say, 7 to 8
Hmm.
PhD people
Hmm.
at the company. So, and just the developers there are
Right.
just really good. Like it's
Yeah.
like a top notch in terms of
Yeah.
like, oh, people I've worked with, like
Uh-huh.
they're really high up there, like in terms of the developer
Wow.
quality, which is cool.
Yeah.
Um,
People
yeah,
with PhDs, they're different. People
yeah,
need to be aware. They don't code like they just the stuff that matters to them. Let's just put it that way. It's different than the stuff that matters to somebody who is not an intellectual, with a PhD developer. It's just one
yeah.
is more practical, one is more theoretical,
Yeah,
and
and yeah, yeah, because be a PhD, it's so funny. It's not like a set time frame to get your PhD. Like
Mhm.
it could take you 10 years to get your PhD depending on where you're going
Right,
and what you're researching and things like that. So no, it's
right.
I really respect the grind to be able to get through that because that's something that I don't like. I don't
I don't,
I'm not
I don't.
I'm not interested in, but people who do it, they're like, it's a really hard thing to do, to go and get your PhD.
Well, you have to love the field, right? I mean, imagine
Yeah,
not, imagine just getting the PhD just for the PhD. That must be
yeah,
like horrible. Like you have to you have to enjoy computer science or whatever you're studying, physics, whatever
yeah,
you're getting. Like it has to be like something of, it has to be a passion of yours. Like I don't, yeah, for me, PhD is, I don't know, it's just a
yeah,
weird concept. Like you have to, like I said, you have to be absolutely in love with the field, whatever it is.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, no, no. At the company itself, I do a lot of Python development,
Mhm.
as well as Angular on the front
Okay,
end. So I
that's cool.
feel like at the company, I'm like more of a full stack in terms of,
Yeah,
I guess as much as a full stack as you can be,
yeah,
because it's hard to become a super expert
right.
within both front end and back end. Like it's,
Yeah,
you have to give on others. Like you have to give on really trying to understand everything, right?
right,
When you're doing it, I guess some people
right,
have more of a handle on it, but
right,
I've been in a position like this for about, I'd say 2 to 3 years, and
right,
3.5 years now, whereas like more full stack related,
right.
and it's just, uh, I don't know. It's just hard to become a straight expert, but you have a
Yeah,
more of an array of skills, right?
right. No,
Um,
absolutely. And I think that employers also know that most people are either front end or back end developers. Like they
yeah,
can tell, okay,
yeah,
this person is a back end developer. And
yeah,
there like there's subtle differences between front end and back end developers, even in
yeah,
personalities and stuff. It's interesting.
yeah,
I'm more of a back end developer, I think, than I am front end.
yeah,
I would love to work on a cool full stack position for like a cool startup maybe, but I know, to be honest with myself, I'm more probably back end. I think
yeah,
like as much as I sometimes resist being back end developer, I that's just, that's
yeah,
my strength, you know.
yeah.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is I'm stronger at front end. I know that
Mhm.
I'm stronger at front end,
Mhm.
but I actually, my favorite place to be is when I'm working in Python and
Mhm.
doing like different things in there, which is
Mhm.
kind of interesting.
Mhm.
I'm becoming more better and better at that, but I'm actually doing like more self-learning to be able
Mhm.
to become better within the language and doing things like that. Because you're, as a
Mhm.
developer, you're never stop learning,
Never,
right? So
never stop, never stop. It is,
yeah, that's a yeah,
yeah, it's like, it's unlike a lot of other fields. You might have a like a confined or limited amount of knowledge that you need to learn, and it's kind of like, it's maybe a little bit more than that, but that's it. But with development, it's just because technology changes too.
oh, it
Remember that.
rapid. Yeah,
Rapidly, yeah, not
yeah,
just, exactly, not just change,
yeah,
but like
yeah.
the pace of it
And
is nuts.
and the thing is that I've seen more of is, I feel like front end
Mhm.
is changing more rapidly than like a back end
Mm.
developer, because you have so many front end frameworks just coming out all the time, right?
Mhm.
And I don't know if it's like, oh, a lot of backend developers trying to solve
Mm.
problems on the front end that
Right.
they're trying to get in place, and then it's like, oh, you get every different type of framework you can think of.
Yeah.
Um, but the thing is, with backend, I feel like it changed more rapidly in terms of like, maybe like DevOps,
Yeah.
where you're like deploying your code
Mhm.
to, and like that, uh,
Mhm.
in that arena, like there. But when you're in the actual language of within like working in Java or in Python or
Mhm.
whatever else it may be, I feel
Mhm.
like those are more mature and they've stood the test of time. So it's like, oh, when it does change, it's like, oh, we're putting in a new method, some new
Yeah.
methods here, trying to like trying to make the language quicker. So we're changing some
Right.
things about in the back end to
Right.
the compile part of it, to where you're not really having to think about it too much. But the
Yeah.
language itself, like, I don't know if it's the same thing with you with
Yeah.
Java, but within
Yeah.
Python, it seems more like this. Oh, when they do come out with a new version, it's like, oh, I got this cool new
Right.
method that I can do instead of actually
Right.
writing that method myself, right?
Right. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
Java just the latest Java changes are actually really cool. I forget which one it is exactly. It's either the latest one or the one before that that introduced some of the JavaScript stuff that Java didn't have. It had like
Okay.
filters, and it's a Lambda type
Yeah, yeah,
deal. And it's actually, I got very excited actually, because a lot of the stuff that I was doing in JavaScript that I was used to, now I could do it in Java without going
yeah,
the long route, to kind of
yeah,
like taking the, the short route. So that was kind of, that was kind of exciting, I guess.
yeah,
I don't know if everybody finds it exciting, but like
yeah, yeah.
I
Exactly.
found
Oh,
I found it exciting.
but yeah,
um,
that's what I'm doing now currently. I'm at like a Python shop with Angular, and honestly, it's really cool. Like this company is just like it's is just so many cool things that we're doing on a daily basis. Just like
right.
new things and just trying to I guess revolutionize the tire industry is
Uh-huh.
pretty much is our motto. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, yeah, I mean, that's funny because it's everybody, almost everybody has cars, and every car has four tires, and yeah, so it's definitely, and it's, I guess it's definitely overdue. And yeah, Torquedo. Oh, that's cool. Because I thought you were working on American Tire.
yeah, yeah.
That's
Yeah, so American Tire Distributors is like they're when I first got to the company,
uh-huh.
it was American Tire Distributors,
Okay.
but then we're branching off as our own LLC, like
Uh-huh.
startup, to be agnostic within the tire industry,
Yeah.
so we can provide like a service to the industry as like an agnostic company, right?
Wow.
Yeah.
That Yeah, that weirdly made sense. Yeah, no, that makes sense.
So like you're not just like, oh, you're favoring this person over
Right,
this person because you're with a certain company, right? We want to be our
right,
own, within our own, so that way we can. It doesn't matter who comes in and they want to get better tools within the tire industry.
right.
Then we're a player that be able to provide that to everyone in the tire industry.
Okay. So would you say it is a relatively young endeavor? Is it considered a startup? It's not a
It's
startup, right?
Yeah, yeah. I would say it's considered like a startup. There's about 30 to 40 of us now. When I was
Okay.
there was about 20 of us.
Okay.
So yeah, it's I would consider it a startup.
Okay.
But yeah.
Yeah, and there's a certain excitement that comes with. I can imagine working for a startup or a younger company versus an established company. Like at
Yeah.
Google, yeah, they're great, they're amazing, they're huge, they're smart, they're all these things, and they still innovate. Obviously, Google does amazing things, obviously, and every developer always talks about Google. But there's something about a startup that or a younger company that like the possibilities are endless. Like it's
Yeah.
still like the very beginning stages. I feel like
Yeah.
that's kind of like cool. If that's if you
Yeah,
like
it's
that, if you can deal with the uncertainty and with some of these
yeah.
other aspects that come with it.
Yeah, it's the cool thing is like, you're trying to when you're a startup, I guess it's depending on what you're doing. Like we're trying to do something that like no one has done in the past in terms of the industry and providing tools in terms of like demand and certain different items that's like really hard within the tire industry. And doing this is super exciting because it just like you're a first mover within trying to do this thing,
Right.
and you're there's just so many unknowns. And when you're like
Right.
breaking past certain barriers,
Right.
like the next thing, you're like, oh man, that was hard, but all right, let's
Right.
keep pushing. Yeah,
Yeah.
this is
It
really
makes
cool.
perfect sense when you said change the tire industry. Everything clicked because I can see it. I can see why it needs to change. I can see the potential. I can see the possibilities. Just and it's just I feel like every industry is bound to change. We're going from an old to a new model in
Yeah,
every single industry, and it's just
yeah,
the timing has to be right though. Like you
yeah,
can't change the airline industry for reason hasn't been changed for a reason, but there will come a time when the airline industry will also be changed. It's just now
yeah,
is not the time. So
yeah,
maybe now is the time for the tire industry to
yeah,
change, and maybe you guys are in the right position, in the right
yeah,
place to do it. And that's
yeah.
I don't know, that's exciting, that's awesome.
And when you can use data and analytics, something
Mhm,
like tangible,
mhm,
that's it, that's the difference there, right? It's like,
mhm.
oh, this, I can see why this will bring me value as a company,
Mhm.
using the direct data from to be able to get better to this point, instead of like staying status quo, or even relying on myself without really using this much data. But if I can use data to get to where I need to be, it's a lot quicker. And that's what Google does, right?
Right.
Google
It's
provides
all
you
about
with, or any of these
right.
things, to where like you've seen exponential growth in an
Right.
industry changing. It's always like, oh, I finally have data behind to make decisions to do something, right?
Right.
When you're doing your ads for a company, there's
Right.
data. Oh, if this ad's doing bad, I got data to tell me, oh, I need to turn this off, and I need to think about something else to do to make this better. So I'm
Right.
not just spending money in a
Yeah.
black hole. Like, I'm spending money
Right.
where it matters most.
Yes, absolutely. Leveraging data in a smart way is key. I mean, you have to, like I can imagine. I haven't been part of a team where we had to do this, but I can imagine if you want to scale, if you want to grow, it's everything because every penny matters. Everything that you have to be as smart as you can with it and not blindly do it. Like right now, like my personal services that I offer tutoring and these coding services. I don't have data. For me, it's kind of like just one person kind of like using intuition. Does this work? Does this doesn't
Yeah,
work? This people didn't like this. But yeah, but if you're a company that's trying to grow and trying to eventually be able to serve more people without collapsing and grow, yeah, you need data. You need all these other things, these other tools
yeah,
that you can't ignore. People,
yeah,
I think a lot of people are just ignorant of that too, including myself, because it's very easy to like not realize it and be like, oh no, it's easy. You just go into an industry and just change it, No,
yeah,
I don't think it's
uh,
that easy, It's, at least I am very naive. And I know there's people who probably think that, and like for me, like even just touching on scalability is incredible. Like the what you have to think about in terms of being able to scale. How would you scale? What's a smart way to scale, allow your company to grow without breaking, and
yeah,
like, so that to me is fascinating. Only recently did I touch on that when I was applying for Amazon, because that's one of their interview components is like, can this person think can this person think about scalability? Can this person like if we came up with a new product, can this person think of making sure that it can grow and all these things, and data is part of that too.
yeah,
Yeah, I feel like all that stuff kind of goes together, using
yeah,
data, using the right
yeah.
servers and all that stuff. Well, I don't want to take too much of your time. I really, really appreciate this. This was exactly what I hoped it would be. It turned out to be exactly what it was. I loved it. Like I said, I want to learn more with people who are trying to learn coding. This is what I do. I try to help people learn how to code, and I really thought that what you said was just spot on, honestly. And I wish that my struggle is one of my struggles is to get my students to do these things that you mentioned, you know. And so I have a hard time now. I got to be able to translate what you said to my students. Like, how do I successfully do it? Because it's one thing to tell them like, hey, you need a good portfolio page. Hey, you need to apply and not just give up after 10 jobs. Hey, you need to reach out. That's one thing. I can do that all day long, but it's not that's not enough. I got to figure out a way to do it successfully. So now I got to like be able to come up with things where those things can be implemented successfully and they can succeed. And if they succeed, then I succeed. So everybody wins.
Yeah. No, it's best of luck, man. No, it's and to your students as well too, or whoever you're trying to help. Like, the
Appreciate it.
biggest thing that I could say is it's going to be a grind. Like, you have to have grit, and you have to have a short-term memory in terms of whatever it may be. If some in terms of rejection, and
Mhm.
just keep pushing forward. Like, it's gonna be, you're not gonna want to at some time, but
Right.
if you can get past that, then the next time something comes in your way, it's gonna be easier to push back. past that, because you're going to have a lot of hiccups when learning development, and it's going to be a grind.
Yeah,
That's all it is.
absolutely. And I learned myself, like just talking to you, you reminded me of things that I've forgotten about. And you also kind of touched on things where like I'm like, yeah, I can do more of that. Well, so this stuff doesn't just apply to learning to code and getting a job. This applies in like, even if you want to learn to code for your own personal projects or whatever, for whatever else reason, like a lot of these principles, they apply, they still remain. And so I appreciate that. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. That was nice. It was good seeing you again. We went to
Yeah,
UNM together, right?
yeah,
Was
yeah.
it same
It's been
time?
a while. Yeah, and you're more about my brother, Umar
It's
Abdul Hakeem.
okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So you're more of his level, but I remember seeing you around and stuff too. I was
Yeah.
there from 2008 to 2012.
Okay, I had graduated at that
Yeah,
point. I think I was done, and then you started. Okay, you was the next generation of
yeah,
people.
like,
Yeah, yeah,
exactly,
okay, cool. That's so awesome. It's funny how
exactly.
life works, the connections that come back to you, and that's the other thing I would like to say. I should really wrap this up, but like, connections, people, so important. Whether whether you're becoming a developer or whatever else in life, like the relationships that you build and that you have is is so important. And I only realize this as I'm getting older. I didn't know this when I was younger. I was reckless with my connections and my relationships, that now I'm kind of like, crap, I wish I was better friends with these people or had better connections. But I cherish this one, so thank you so much for this talk. Thank you. And we'll stay connected. We're on LinkedIn.
Yeah,
I'll
exactly.
I'll see your updates. I'll see your updates. You'll see mine, and so on.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, yeah. Wish you nothing but success, man. It's really cool. Hear your
thank you.
tutoring and whatever else it may be. And yeah, this was really cool.
Yeah, for sure. You too. I wish you, best of luck, and you're doing great. This is awesome. uh,
All right.
all right,
Have
man.
a great evening, man. All right.
Yeah, you too. Take care.